Good evening, mortals of the light. And here I am looking at something that isn't Halloween related. Some of you might be wondering why I'm not tackling this one. Well, I'll be honest, Derios here knows a lot more about these obscure games than I do, so he'll be doing those from now on. I'll still chip in from time to time though. Thanks for the explanation, my angel friend. Now then, on with the review. So, have any of you ever heard of a Wii DS game called Contact? Chances are you probably haven't. This game didn't sell well, and its critical reception was on the mixed side. Despite all this game sort of has a cult following. Some people even refer to this game as the Earthbound of the DS era. The game was directed and written by a Japanese man called Akira Ueda, a man who's mostly known for doing the background and map design for a couple of games here and there. But he has had his hands on being the director of certain games, this game being the most well known of them. So then, is this game any good? And do I think you all should play it? Well, let's find out. Okay, before we get to that, can I rant about how the European box art for this game sucks? The Japanese and American box art is fine, it's a picture of the main character. What does Europe get? A freaking sprite sheet. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, guys. Alright, let's actually get to it. We'll start off with a brief story synopsis. The game is about some old geezer known as the Professor and his pet dog Mochi, who acts like a cat for some reason, trying to recollect these green jewel-like objects known as cells to repower their lab ship after getting shot down, scattering the cells in several different locations. Enter Terry, or whatever you decide to call him, a wee lad who is helping the Professor recollect the cells and the person you play as in this game. The Professor then fuses his lab with a pirate galleon he found to keep a low profile and to make travelling without the cells easier. Recollecting these trinkets won't be easy, however, as the cells are causing monsters to form from them. Not even the fridges are safe! How am I gonna make my deviled eggs now? But that won't be the only thing you'll be taking on, as you'll also be dealing with this group known as the Cosmonauts. They're after the cells too, so you'll butt heads with them a couple of times in the story. You'll also run into a bunch of other quirky characters and strange scenarios in this story. And that sums up the synopsis. The story goes a little deeper than how I explained it, but that's the basic gist in it. I'll go a bit more deeply into it in the spoiler section of this review. Now with that taken care of, let's get to the gameplay. This game is an RPG, and a rather unique one. The game was actually designed to be controlled entirely with the touchscreen, but if you're not a fan of touch controls, you can play with the buttons if you want. That's how I play personally. You move Terry around using the D-pad or by touching where you want him to go using the bottom screen. Pressing the X button or touching Terry and the symbol that looks like a DS will allow you to use an invention the Professor made for Terry, the Multi-Element Nano Unit, or the menu for short. He could do a bunch of different things. Check your items, stats, switch your weapons, open mystery decals, or heal yourself with food. You have to be careful with what you're eating or how often you're eating though, because this game has a sort of digestion time mechanic. When you're about to consume a piece of food, it will show you how much HP it restores, its digestion time, and what stats it will temporarily increase or decrease. The stomach icon next to Terry in the food section of the menu shows how full he is. If Terry gets too full, you won't be able to eat anything until the stomach icon empties. And you have to wait in real time for it to empty. So it may be in your best interest to stick to foods that heal a lot but have short digestion time, like the portions. As I mentioned earlier, you can look at your stats while in the menu. Stat growth in this game looks very similar to how it does in Final Fantasy II, and I mean the real Final Fantasy II, not Final Fantasy IV. Basically, for your stats to increase, you have to do things that revolve around it. Like for example, if you want to increase your cooking stat, you can either increase it by cooking food or defeating enemies with cooking skills. It's an interesting way to do stat growth, but just like in Final Fantasy II, it has issues. Let's say you wanted to make Terry really bulky and defensive. The only way to do that would be to force yourself to take hits from enemies, because that's the only way to make his health and defense stats grow. It also makes the task of increasing one stat in particular very repetitious. The stats themselves are for the most part easy to understand, but 3 of the stats you could increase, Fame, Courage, and Karma, are mainly there if you want to befriend the 3 girls you could have on your ship. You could ignore Fame and Courage if you don't care about befriending those 2. The Karma stat is interesting though. How it works is that if you take out hostile NPCs, the stat will increase. However, if you defeat innocent NPCs such as townspeople or wild animals, the stat will decrease. It will also decrease if you steal things from chests that belong to other people, cause you know, stealing's bad. If your karma stat goes so far down that it's in the negatives, innocent NPCs will see you as a threat and either start running away from you or try taking you out themselves. The professor will even warn you about this early on in the game, so try not to let that happen. Unless you're trying to befriend Aya, the 3rd girl that is, because nice guys finished last I suppose. Another way to improve your stats with equipment decals. You'll sometimes find these bad boys trapped by enemies or in chests. You tear them open using the touchscreen, which feels really satisfying to do, and take a look at what stats they improve. If you like what you see, you can add it to one of your 4 slots. If you don't like what it offers though, you can throw it away by touching the trash can. And once it's thrown away, it's gone for good, because according to the professor, these decals do their adhesiveness quite quickly. Now let's get to how the battle system works. To attack enemies, you need to switch to battle mode. You can do this by pressing the B button or touching Terry and the icon with the 2 swords. Once you're in battle mode, Terry will start automatically attacking the enemy that you targeted. You can switch targets by pressing the L button. I hear this battle system is similar to that of Xenoblade Chronicles is, but I've never played that so I wouldn't know. You have to be a little careful about fighting multiple enemies at once though, because if you're not in a good position, you might find yourself getting stun locked by multiple enemies. You also move much more slowly in battle mode, so if you want to make a quick getaway, or if you think an enemy is too overwhelming for you, turn off battle mode to move faster. But remember that you can't retaliate, and I think you take more damage like this? I'm not entirely sure about that. I just wish there was more variety to the battles, because every encounter is almost the same. Just take out what's in your way, heal yourself if you need to, rinse and repeat. So things do get rather repetitious. Thankfully the major boss fights are a wee bit more involved, and I think they're the best parts of the game because of it. Too bad there's only 4 of them, including the final boss. As I said earlier, you don't have to command Terry to do basic attacks. However, you can command when he uses techs. Techs are pretty much your special moves. Sometimes when you take out an enemy, you get EP. You get all up to 5 at max. You can press the Y button or touch Terry and the icon on the left to use one. The techs you can use depend on what weapon class you're using and what outfit Terry has on, as well as what level he is with all those things. Interestingly enough though, there are some EP skills that you probably won't even see while doing a normal playthrough of this game, because unlocking them requires countless hours of grinding to get. I'm not even sure why they're even in the game to be honest. There are 3 weapon classes: punching weapons, slashing weapons, and striking weapons. Each weapon class has their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as passive skills you can learn when you level up their respective stats up. Some weapons can only be equipped if you're wearing a certain outfit. I'll get to those in a bit. Most of the action takes place on the bottom screen by the by. With the exception of some cutscenes and boss fights, the top screen will usually show a live feed of the professor's lab. He'll comment on the current situation too. I should probably also mention that I like to bring up long dead internet memes from time to time, like attack its weak point for massive damage. Oh no, not this again. Wait, again? This meme came up in another one of your reviews? Oh yeah, I need to talk about the outfits since I mentioned them earlier. There are 6 outfits you can collect. The elemental outfits are Aqua Shot, Knuckle Ball, Flyboy, and Nitro Boost. Each outfit represents water, earth, fire, and wind respectively. Insert avatar joke here. Oh, and the Knuckle Ball outfit has the special ability to dig in certain places. Why does this outfit get a special ability and the other 3 don't? I don't blooming know. Favoritism maybe? The job outfits are Mr. Cuisine, Fisher King, and Shadow Thief. The outfits represent the cooking, fishing, and thievery jobs. Well, If thievery really counts as a job, then sure. Let me explain how the job outfits work, starting with the Mr. Cuisine outfit. Cooking is very simple. All you have to do is put 1 or 2 ingredients in the pan, then confirm it to cook it up. Though there is a chance for your food to turn to a piece of charcoal or it just failing for some reason. You can't cook everything right away though. You'll have to reach a certain cooking level before you can make certain things. And I really wish you could cook things in bulk, but no. If you have 50 pieces of raw chicken, you have to cook them all individually, which can take a lot of time. There are different recipe guides you can buy in order to learn what you can put together to make something, though you really don't need them. If you have what goes together memorized, then you won't need the recipe guides at all. Let's move on to fishing now. This is simple too. All you need to do is equip a fishing rod, and they're technically weapons, so you can beat the piss out of enemies with them if you want to. Back on topic, you'll need to face a body of water and press A in front of it, and I mean almost any body of water. You can even fish in some bathtubs and sinks for some reason. Once you do that, a display will come up and show how your bobber is moving. When it goes down, press A to try and reel in the fish, then a bar will come out that will determine your success or failure. Mashing the A button helps too, but you won't always find fish. Sometimes you find other stuff like junk, weapons, map pieces, and video game cards. Okay. Similar to cooking in this game, you can only catch certain fish if you reach a certain level. Well, according to game facts, because I'll be honest, I don't use the Fisher King outfit that much in this game. But it is there if you want to get some nifty stuff or complete certain side quests. Finally, there's lockpicking. With the Shadow Thief outfit, you can open locked doors and chests that can't be opened with keys. Just like with fishing, your success or failure is determined by a bar. And again, mashing A helps. Another similarity to fishing is that you'll have to reach a certain level in order to pick certain locks. I don't really use the Shadow Thief outfit that much either. It's my personal favorite in terms of looks though. Equipment decals aren't the only kind of decals in this game, as you also have special one-of-a-kind decals called trick decals. Most of these decals were made by the professor and will be replenished every time you visit him. Your selection of them starts out quite small, but you'll unlock more as you go through the game. You can go through the trick decal menu by either pressing the R button or by touching the icon at the top right corner of the bottom screen. The question mark decal turns enemies into wild animals, and passive NPCs into skeletons. I don't use this one that often, only when I'm in a pinch or something. Next is the Mochi Decal, which calls upon Mochi to help you defeat enemies on the screen. Depending on how much you've played with Mochi during the save intermissions, will determine what Mochi does to the enemies. I like the one where Mochi does decent damage to all the enemies on the screen best personally. Then there's the Ship Decal. It takes you back to your ship. Useful if you don't want to backtrack, though I do wish you had this one at the start, but thankfully you do get it early on. After that is the Cell Decal. You can only use this one when there's a cell on screen. This is how you collect them, as I think it's stated that they're unsafe to hold in your hands. Also, I love the jingle that plays when you collect one. Our next decal is the Constellation Decal. It's a full health restore. Moving on, we have the Balloon Decal. This one's fun to use. You have a few seconds to blow into the microphone as hard as you can. The bigger the balloon when it ends, the more damage it will do. Following that is the Sun and Moon Decal. This one involves charts. When you use it, it cycles between the sun and the moon image. If you get the sun image, it does massive damage to all the enemies on the screen. But if you get the moon image, it puts the enemies to sleep for a little bit. And finally, we have the UFO Decal. It takes out all the enemies on the screen. It doesn't work on bosses though, and enemies taken out with it won't give you any experience, money, or items. This decal is unique due to the fact that you don't get it from the professor like all the others. How you get it is rather strange. You have to visit this grave at a certain time of day, then a UFO will show up, blow into the microphone a couple of times, and this alien will do a bit of a monologue and give it to you. Yeah, this game gets pretty weird at times. Oh, and don't worry, it's not a one-use thing. The professor said his technology can recreate them like the rest of his trick decals. These trick decals are useful if you're in a pinch, so remember to use them when you can, especially during the boss fights. The areas that you go through are pretty interesting, but before I get to those, I have to talk about the ship. This place is pretty much your main hub. It's got a kitchen where you could do cooking, a changing room where you could switch outfits, a bathtub which fully restores your health, a bed which saves your game, and finally the sea navi. This is what you choose in order to select which area you want to head to next. Once you have the area selected, you'll begin saving there, and you have to wait real in-game time to sail there. But if you want to get there in an instant, sleep in your bed and save your game. After Sari wakes up, the professor will inform you that you've already reached your destination, so if you don't want to waste time fishing, just do that. The layouts for the areas you go through are decent enough. There are extra goodies to find if you're the explorative type, and exploration is the only way you're gonna get your hands on those different outfits, so remember to do that. There are 2 areas you can only get to if you find the respective maps, those being La Chef Isle and Bamboo Island. You'll need to go to these places if you want to get your hands on the Mr. Cuisine and Shadow Thief outfits. However, there's one section that I absolutely cannot stand, and it's this one section where you're going through a pyramid. Remember those 4 elemental outfits I mentioned earlier? At first you think they're optional, and they're kinda easy to miss if you're being hasty or not the type to do side quests. But for this segment, you need to have every elemental outfit in order to complete the puzzle. But owning every outfit isn't enough. You have to have one of them equipped, and you have to stand the corresponding elemental tile with each outfit on. But remember, you can only change costume when you're back on the ship, meaning you'll have to make 4 separate trips back to that room just to open the door! What kind of pacebreaker is that? That isn't my only major complaint though, because after you get to a certain section of an area, you come across what I call a halfway point. It's an area with a bath and a bed. So naturally you'd think that when you save the game, it would act as a checkpoint of sorts and put you back there when you lose all your health, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case at all. Even if you save there and get taken out, you're put all the way back to the bed at the ship. Why? Some of these areas take a lot of time and effort to get through. You're telling me I have to do it all over again? F that. I think at that point it's better to just turn off your game and reload your save. That way you could at least start off at the bed you saved at. That may sound scummy to some people, but if the game's gonna cheat me of checkpoints, I may as well cheat back. I may as well briefly talk about Wifiland. This was a place where you could go to if your DS was connected to the internet. You could add others with friend codes, and there were certain items, weapons, and events you could find here. Unfortunately, due to the DS's weak Wi-Fi servers being shut down in 2014, all that stuff is inaccessible now. I hear there's a way to get Wi-Fi working on DS's nowadays using exploits and such, but my attempts to get that stuff working have been unsuccessful, so it looks like I personally won't be able to experience Wifiland. Maybe you guys can get it working though? Visually, I think the game looks nice, if a bit on the grainy side. The areas have a sort of photorealistic art style. All the characters are chibi style though, and they look nice too. One thing I find kinda strange is that Terry has orange hair on his sprite, but on his artwork he has black hair. I think the character and enemy designs are pretty good too, they're fitting for a game like this. Weirdly enough, my favourite enemies are the machines that went haywire because of one of the cells. You'll fight fridges, vacuum cleaners, and even flip phones. This is definitely a game of the mid-2000s. Those dickheads with the RG calculator move can f*** off though. The soundtrack for this game is fantastic. It's full of catchy and upbeat tunes. There are 2 composers who worked on this game, and they both did a fantastic job on this game's OST. Seriously, I don't think there's one song in this game that I dislike. I wish some of them weren't interrupted by the battle themes all the time. It doesn't help that every time it is, the track for the area restarts. So in game, you'll mostly be familiar with the first few tracks rather than the full thing, unfortunately. Okay, it's time for the full plot synopsis. It's time I talked about this game's story in full and my thoughts on the whole thing. I'm going to be spoiling this thing rotten, so if you are thinking about playing this game for yourself blind, which I think you should do, skip to this time here. And also avoid reading the comments too, if there are any. So let's start this thing in 3, 2, 1...
Ah, spoiler alert!
Okay, so when you start a new file, the only thing you'll be greeted with is the logo on the top screen and the professor typing away on the keyboard in his lab on the bottom screen. Nothing else will happen if you wait around, which will probably influence you to tap him on the bottom screen. When you do, he realizes and tells you, the player, to do it again. He'll then talk to you directly how he's been sending out the stress signal for a while, and you are the one to answer it. That's right, you, the player, are an integral character to this game's story. He also mentions that according to his computer, you used the DS to contact him. Well, technically I'm using a new 3DS XL, but close enough. After that, the professor will ask you some questions about yourself. Your name, the area where you live, your favorite food, your least favorite food. Most of this information is for Wifiland, by the by. And a secret desire of yours, which he promises not to look at. You could probably see why a lot of people compare this game to Earthbound now, because that game also opened asking you a couple of questions before you got started. Once that's all done, he once again asks you for your assistance, as you might be able to change the outcome, as he puts it. No pressure, because he says that you can think of the whole situation as a game. After this, we see a rather trippy scene where this boy is trying to catch a girl, but she keeps disappearing. Eventually he does catch her on the top of this tropical castle. She asks if he is Terry, and this is where you get to choose a name for him or keep it default. But this was all revealed to be a dream that Terry was having, as afterwards it shows him waking up from sleeping on a bench. We then cut to the professor getting chased in the sky, getting shot down by another ship, causing one of its cells to go loose and land near Terry. The professor lands his ship to reclaim the cell, but as the attacking ship gets closer, the professor tells Terry to hurry into his ship as they try to get away. But the professor's ship is shot down again, causing all the cells to go loose and throwing Terry overboard. While this is happening, it shows Terry's mother attempting to call him, but it doesn't pick up. We then see Terry unconscious face first in the sand of a deserted isle. The professor then asks you to wake him up by tapping him a few times, and guide him to the galleon where he fused his lab ship in. He did ask Terry to help him recollect the cells that he lost when the lab ship was shot down. The professor also gives Terry a wrist communicator so he can keep in touch with Terry. He also makes sure to keep his interactions with you, the player, a secret. Pretty standard stuff, right? However, things get complicated when the cosmonauts show up. The cosmonauts consist of 5 members: Lester Sproul, Nadia Kroll, Bull Beatniks, Miriam the Monkey, and their leader Mint, but is mostly known as their stage name Muse, as they're also members of a band. Mint was also the same girl that Terry saw in his dream. As seen in the brief plot synopsis earlier, they're after the cells too, because according to them, the cells were theirs to begin with, and they need them back for a project they're working on. Also scattered around certain areas of the game, we can find parts of a biography that was written about them. According to the first part, they're pacifists at heart that want the best for everyone. It also elaborates on the professor in the last part. It states that he's actually from another world, which you can kind of figure out for yourself just by seeing that himself, Mochi, and his lab ship have different art styles from everything else in this game. But the cosmonauts' hands aren't entirely clean. They also have a cloning facility under their belt, which is, unethical. There's one part in the story where you run into an old man that had his memories taken away from said facility, and a girl that got left behind due to a clone taking her place. So I guess the cosmonauts have good intentions, but their methods of trying to help out others are morally wrong. The professor is also kinda in the wrong too, because again, he's trying to get the cells back that apparently weren't his in the first place, and not only that, he's kinda holding Terry against his will. And he's aware of it, but he doesn't let Terry visit his parents or anything like that. He does let Terry see a text that his mother left him, but that's about it. Oh yeah, the professor also used Terry's phone as spare parts to repair his computer. And he does say he should have asked first, but he did it anyway. Dick move, dude. But things take an even more drastic turn in the ending. The final part has Min and Terry fighting on the top of a ship for the last cell. The struggles cause the cells to fly in the air and the professor in his ship grabs it. However, things aren't so good for Terry and Min, as the ship those two are fighting on spins out of control, causing Terry to fall to the ground. He lands in the same place before near the beginning. Don't you just love bookends? Anyway, he gets up and starts talking to you. Yes, you, the player. which is kinda jarring considering he didn't say a word before this. Terry says that he was aware that you were controlling him the whole time, and he's pretty angry about it. You see, when you first wake up Terry early on in the game turns pixelated for a second. And you don't know it at the time, but I think that was there to show you taking control of Terry. So you, the player, were also in the wrong as well. He's also mad at the professor too, because he kinda just left Terry when he got his hands on all the cells. No thank you, no heartwarming farewell, nothing. This causes Terry to let out all his anger on you by trying to attack you directly. But you can't lose this. Terry attempts to keep himself healthy by hiding behind a tree and healing, but with a couple of taps, he's down and out. Terry realizes that he isn't strong at all because it was really you doing everything. Terry then angrily takes off and throws the wrist communicator that the professor gave him and just lies down annoyed. But things take a turn for the better as Mint visits him with a ship and takes Terry back to his house, where he can, at long last, reunite with his mother and the rest of his family. But before letting Terry go, Mint asks him that next time, maybe he could help her out instead. Then, there's the final scene. It's a message left by the professor. The message says that he's sorry to both you and Terry for manipulating the both of you. And he's aware of his status as just a character in a video game, and that he's pretty much just data. But he wonders why he has all these thoughts and emotions. He wanted the cells because he wanted to use his lab ship to explore places. He also says that he continued to think and work on his inventions while you had the game off. He also asks you if you took good care of Terry and weren't mistreating him because he was just a character in the game. And this part really pulled on my heartstrings. That secret desire you put at the start of the game, he will hold on to that as something to remember you by. Oh yeah, he saved the data of everything up till now, so if you ever want to experience these events all over again, you can. When I first played this game and saw this scene, it was a lot for me to take in. I distinctly remember turning the game off, taking the cards out, and staring at it thinking, did that all really happen? This is the reason why I didn't want to spoil this game's story, because it's definitely the game's strongest aspect. Honestly, this game made me rethink how I see video games as a whole. That's how powerful it was. This is also why all I wanted to talk about this game's story in the spoiler section. I didn't want to rob others of experiencing this game's story like I did for the first time. To wrap things up, while Contact might not be the best DS game I've ever played, it's quite far from that with all its issues it has. It's definitely one of the most interesting DS games I've played, especially with its story and its unique game mechanics. Do I recommend this game? Well, it's hard to say. If you like what you see and are willing to put up with all its issues, then I'd say go for it. If not, then don't bother. I would have loved to see the sequel to this game, with all its issues fixed, and at one point that could have happened. There was going to be another game Grasshopper were working on called Space Agency, which had a striking resemblance to Contact. Well, to be fair, I love their games too, but unfortunately the game was cancelled, which really sucks. I would have loved to have played a follow-up to Contact, but that's just how things go sometimes. All we have are some screenshots of what could have been. Grasshopper Inc. did work on some other games that sort of resembled Contact, but these games were entirely different beasts of their own. I would know, because I bought them in hopes of buying some sort of Contact spiritual successor, but my hopes were crushed once again. Maybe we could cover those two games, but we can find someone who fluently understands Japanese. Also, while getting images of this game, I was able to find screenshots from Contact's mobile game where you look after Mochi? I don't know much about it, and I wasn't able to find any footage of it, so it's probably lost media now. I was also able to find this Professor Clock add-on for Yahoo Widgets. Sorry, I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, aren't I? Wow, everything you said sounded like it came from the heart. You're really passionate about video games too, aren't you? I guess you could say that. Well, I'm glad you chose to live with me in the end. I think we'd make a good team. Really? Of course! Your experience on obscure video games is intriguing. In fact, I'm letting you have the next review. Oh, well, thanks I guess. I'll be thinking about what game I should look at next. So until next time, thank you for watching, stay safe, and remember that not all things that are dark are evil. Your success or failure is determined by a gar. A gar? Like a fish? We were talking about fishing earlier! Stop!